Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to RePlastic. I'm your host for this afternoon, Dave Marin. I'm an assistant professor of modeling technology in the School of Constructed Environments here at Parsons School of Design. As an artist, designer, and fabricator, I've continually been interested in materials, making, and process. Much of my work has been with plastic, as it can be cast, it can be molded, cut, formed, remelted, etc. I've looked at it always as an engineering wonder and of interest. Almost anything can be made using plastic, and it has become an ever-growing replacement within manufacturing. Plastic can be furniture, clothing, bottles, appliances, cars, and is part of most products we purchase. It is ingrained in our society to an extent that we relate it to our image of certain objects. When we picture a bottle, we think of plastic rather than the traditional use of glass. It has become the standard from which we associate objects to. As an educator, I've realized the growing dependence students have upon plastics. More and more, students answer the question of what the design is made of with plastic. In some instances, that's the correct answer, but it shouldn't be the default. It also has to become a more articulated answer, as plastic is an overwhelmingly simplified term for a category of materials that range from the polycarbonate that corrects my vision for this afternoon to the polyester Metro card I used to purchase my ride here today. We also need to become more aware of the problems of plastic as we are with its benefits. Plastic is used in production because it was engineered for that purpose. It was designed to solve problems. Need a lighter material? Plastic. Need a strong but flexible material? Plastic. The problem is that we have proliferated the use of plastic. We also have become desensitized to it. Plastic was once the state-of-the-art material. It was used to symbolize the future, the material that would make everything possible. However, in the widespread use, it has become commonplace. Something that is simply there to deliver what we want, and once that purpose is served, we toss it in the bin, throwing it away. This isn't anything new and has been practiced for decades, but as with most issues, out of sight, out of mind. The problem is it is no longer out of sight. We are familiar with the problem. Plastic waste never goes away. The majority of the 8.3 billion metric tons produced from 1950 to current day is still in existence. If we're attentive, there is always a new story every day about plastic pollution, and we're familiar with the images of landfills and plastic in our oceans and on our beaches. The images of plastic pollution are daunting and paint a gloomy outlook. However, I'm hopeful and optimistic, and that is our focus of this afternoon, to discuss how we can be productive, how we can clean up our environment, reclaim material, recycle, reuse, and rethink the use of plastic with alternative materials. There's no silver bullet. There is no one-size-fits-all answer. We need to be collectively working on various agendas, policies, and initiatives that together attack the overall problem. For instance, Ocean Cleanup and 4Ocean are actively pursuing cleaning up the ocean and beaches worldwide. Parley works with companies like Adidas to change manufacturing practices. Companies like Everlane, Green Toys, and EcoBirdie promote the use of plastic in their production of clothing, toys, and furniture made from discarded toys. Precious Plastics is an open source global community promoting local collection and supporting the economic viability of starting businesses centered upon reuse. James Shaw, Chen and Kai, Dirk Vanderkoy are among many product designers promoting awareness of reuse in their practice, while others are creating work from alternative materials, such as Danielle Trophy's work with mycelium and companies that are making single-use products from biodegradable materials like Lollywear seaweed straws. Today, we'll take a closer look at the issues surrounding the recovery, reuse, and rethinking about plastic. Our program from the day begins with presentations from Arta Yazdanseta, discussing the work of our Sustainable Systems curriculum here at Parsons. Kara Napalitano will talk about her work at Sims Municipal Recycling, where she is the Outreach and Education Coordinator. And Kim Markel is an artist and designer who will present her work creating objects from waste material. After the presentations, we'll visit the exhibition in the Events Cafe highlighting work from Kim, the global precious plastics community, student and faculty explorations from Parsons, along with samples from our Healthier Materials Library and our precious plastic equipment built by students in the Build Your Own Factory elective that I teach. We'll complete the day with a panel conversation from our speakers, moderated by Timo Risanen, our Associate Dean of SCE, Associate Director of the Tishman Environmental and Design Center, and Assistant Professor of Fashion and Sustainability. So, to begin the day, let me introduce our first presenter, Arta Yazdanseta. Dr. Arta Yazdanseta is an Assistant Professor of Environmental Design and Technology at the School of Constructed Environments at Parsons School of Design at the New School University. She's the coordinator for the Sustainable Systems in the first year at the School of Art and Design History and Theory. Dr. Yazdanseta earned her Doctor of Design and Master of Design in Energy and Environments from the Harvard Graduate School of Design and her professional architectural degree from the Pratt Institute. Her research explores the intersection between design, building science, and plant biophysical ecologically, and emphasizes coupling building energy performance with vertical vegetative surfaces through design strategies. She served as a researcher at the Harvard Center for Green Buildings and Cities. Her work experience includes both large-scale master plans and small residential projects. She has worked with well-known design firms such as Shop Architects and HMA. She founded her own architectural design studio, Lynx Architecture, in 2008. She has taught at Northeastern University, Harvard Graduate School of Design, Boston Architectural College, and the Pratt Institute. In 2012, Dr. Yazdanseta's team was the first prize winner of the IBPSA Competition Award in Chambéry, France, and her master's thesis, Radiative Cooling Roof Systems, was a winner of the Harvard Sustainability Grant. She is a recipient of the Circle Award Fellowship and was an AIA Women's Architectural Auxiliary Eleanor Allwork Scholar. Her work has been displayed at the New York chapter of the AIA and has been published in Metropolis magazine. Join me in welcoming Dr. Arta Yazdanseta.
Hi, everyone. I'm a bit short, so I'm going to move to this direction so I'll see you. I want to actually map out the core course in our first year of Sustainable Systems. What I'll do today is just basically try to define some of the pedagogical issues that we are trying to address within the course, within this course, and map out the core concept that we are trying to achieve and teach our students. These 4 topics are pretty much the core concepts, the pillars of our class: climate change, energy, water, and material. Now, as you all know, these are each of these on its own, you can actually write a dissertation on it, right? So it's a really complex, deep topic in each of these. But to make this even more complicated, we are actually dealing with these topics in 4 particular lenses. We introduce each topic within the context, of course, what's happening now, the science behind it. So we are very clear that climate change is not something you can choose to believe in, but it's happening, and without you believing it or not. So that is mapping out the science and describing what it is, why we are here, where we are, and then from there we are trying to actually open up the conversation by mapping each of these topics within a system that they are operating in. So the system thinking becomes a crucial point within the class. Throughout the class, we continuously go over the topic. And as soon as, of course, you're talking about any systems within these categories, you're going to be confronted with the social and environmental justice issues. So as we are unpacking, all these other topics start surfacing, and we need to actually unpack and deal with. And lastly, how as designers, we have the agency to situate ourselves within this context, within this crisis, and not only think about this as the crisis and the doom and gloom that we are very used to think about, but think about this as a leverage, as how we can become the person, the agent that is of our own time, and how we can actually take these challenges and rethink them in a positive way and use it to bring the best foot forward and address the climate change. So within that context, there are few notes throughout the semester that everybody come together and everybody shares those experiences. One of the, there are two major field trips. One of them is the UN trip, which the executive dean joins us. We have different type of speakers. Timo actually joined us this semester. Thank you again. So we have basically a panel discussion. So our presenters normally are according to theme. We are talking about the social environmental justice issues. We have the presentation and have a panel discussion trying to map out the issue and then ultimately bring it back to design and understand this through the lens of our agency. The second trip, which actually happened today, I'm literally coming back from this trip, is the Circle Line trip. Now, the Circle Line trip that we normally think of is a touristy version. We don't do that. Instead, what we do, we start from this point right up here, from where the Circle Line is, and we literally go along past this area, and we actually go back to Newtown Creek. And the conversation in this trip is all about resiliency issues, the urban pollution, urban infrastructure. Martina today had a fabulous talk, thank you, for around the urban infrastructure and water rise and resiliency topic, as I mentioned. And also by the time we get to the Newtown Creek, we talk about waste and sewage. So basically this trip maps out the underbelly of the city and the infrastructure that it takes to actually run the city, and how we can think about the city for the first time, actually, well, for most of our students for the first time, looking at the city from kind of an inverted view, right? You're standing outside, looking back in and looking at all the things that are making our city run, and it's kind of hiding behind the scene, and we're really not thinking about how everything is connected. So it comes back right into the system thinking and understanding the bigger picture. So these two trips are rather crucial for us to set the conversation within the classes. And then we have two science modules. So we have several science modules, but each faculty selects two of these few science modules and I'm describing in a second what does that mean. So these, each of these modules are describing alternative method. Like, for example, we have biomaterial combustion mycelium, natural dye instead of the artificial dye. Alternative methods that designers can get engaged with the topic. Within also, we are trying to actually help students to think about and investigate these topics in a particular manner. I want to call that design research, and what it really means is that you are looking at the methodologies that are used in scientific communities. When we would translate that back and basically situate that within a design field, and we try to have a rigorous investigation and have specific question of what are the ways we can actually use these alternative methodologies through that rigorous method to be able to address some of these bigger topics that I just discussed. Besides this, we also are connected with the Lang Science Lab, and that another type of exposure that our students actually get. So I'm going to just quickly give you some of the samples, work samples that is coming from remarkable faculty and students. Again, this is pretty much describes how we are thinking about each product through a system thinking and where things are going and where ultimately we are picking them and where they're ending up. This particular one is, of course, is a kombucha, kind of a notebook that the students have done. This is just really like fresh off the oven. I just recently got this picture. The idea of like replacing leather with instead of instead of using leather, using kombucha. We really work with since this is dealing with the system topics, we really think about how as designers we need to think about the afterlife. So this particular project is very successful in that the students, as they are designing, they're thinking about what happens when you're disposing it, how you can actually reuse each item again or recycle each item again. This is from Martina's class, basically looking into natural pigment, the ways in which we can actually use that for within design. This deals with some of the natural dyes that I just described, and at this point the students are thinking about where their dye is coming from. When you're washing it off, where is that pollution is going? What's happening to that? So again, goes back to the thinking. This is one of the works modules that is being offered at Lang. The students learn to paint with bacteria. It's from Martina's class again, which I think it's a very interesting way of engaging students with different type of methods, unconventional methods that we really don't think about as a type of a self-expression. Also, we engage our students to think about their waste differently. So what if the waste, and this is something we are going to probably talk about today, what if the waste is actually a resource that we can bring it back and recycle it back within our work and within the way we are investigating our work. So these are some of those works that are coming from that type of investigation. Again, throughout all these processes, we are making sure that we are keeping the bigger picture, where things are coming from and where they are ending up in. And to me, I think it's very important to describe what does the activism mean? So I think as designers, we have a very particular responsibility and role. In this particular case, thinking about shelter, the displacement of different migrants because of water rights or any other situation that comes up, and how we can actually think about that as designers and what our agencies, or perhaps actually just creating moments to bring attention. So some of our field actions that we have, or moments that we actually have our students to reach out to different communities, having exhibitions like this can be a powerful moment for our students to start thinking about what's their role within larger context that they are operating within. Okay, I'm going to stop right here, and then I'm sure there are more questions comes up. Thank you.
Our next speaker for this afternoon is Cara Napolitano. She is currently the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Sims Municipal Recycling Facility in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, which is the largest materials recovery facility in the country. At Sims, Cara offers educational tours to student groups, grades 2 through 12, along with college and adult groups, engaging people of all ages on the topic of recycling. As a licensed master social worker, her interests focus on environmental social work and the circular relationship between human action, environmental wellness, and human wellness. She's a regular animal care volunteer at Earth Matter Farm, teaching children about the joys of composting and animal care. Prior to sustainability education, Cara was a theatrical teaching artist and administrator. She's also a voice and tri-yoga teacher. On the weekends, you might find her leading story time for children in Bryant Park, inspiring young people to improve literacy, confidence, and musically. She is passionate about offering engaging education to children and adults too, why not? And is thrilled to be spreading the message of recycling and sustainability through the Interactive Recycling Education Center at Sims. Join me in welcoming Kara.
Plastic. It's a big topic, right? Plastics are, as has been said already today, they are a big part of our lives every single day. We've woven them into our daily routine in such a way that they're pretty much unavoidable, right? You wake up, you brush your teeth, plastic toothbrush. Hopefully you brush your teeth before bed as well. You hold your cell phone case for however many hours every day, right? It's probably plastic. Most of those cases are. A lot of toilet seats. Can't avoid those. Yeah, a lot of those are plastic too. So in my line of work, I see piles and piles and thousands of pounds of plastic every day. Most of it looks like this, or this. Most of it is what we would call single-use plastic, and all of it came from your recycling bins. So as Dave said, my name is Kara Napolitano. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Sims Municipal Recycling Facility in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. So Sims is what is called a material recovery facility, also known as a MRF. It's kind of fun to say. I always make the kids, when they come, say MRF because I think it's a funny word. But there are MRFs like us all over the country. So our job at Sims is to receive and sort all of the recyclables from all of the homes and public schools in all of New York City. So just take that in for a moment. All of the recyclables from all of the homes and all of the public schools. And it's basically a lot of material that we get every single day. We're sorting about 1,000 tons of materials every day. I explain that to the kids by saying it's about 160 like medium-sized elephants every single day. It's a lot of stuff. Additionally, though, in our super fun and interactive education center, as Dave mentioned, as it is in my bio, we're giving educational tours to kids, grades 2 through 12, also college groups, also adult groups, and corporate groups as well, who want to get a little better at designing for recyclability or using recycled content, which is great. So while my supervisors are handling the business end of the recycling facility, my department, the Education and Outreach Department, is working to engage people on the topic of recycling and trying to demystify that process. What is recycling? How does it work? Try to demystify it for as many people as possible. So most basically, I teach people how to recycle better, and I really love my job. I hope that all of you will consider coming for a tour. It's a lot of fun. Would love to have you. I'll probably keep suggesting that you do that throughout this talk. So let me tell you a little bit about where I work. Let's see if I can figure this out. So the facility in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, there it is. It's kind of pretty. As was mentioned, it is the largest materials recovery facility in the country. We're equipped with about 2.5 miles of interwoven conveyor belts and some really fancy sortation technology. So already, see, don't you want to come on a tour? Yes, maybe you do. So yes, we're very big, and we handle those top 2 rows. Hopefully all of you have seen these pictures before as you live in New York City. Great. So we handle the top 2 rows, right? Paper, and metal, glass, plastic, and cartons. We do not handle organics. Please do not put those in your recycling bin, though we get plenty of them. The city does have an organics collection program. Maybe you're familiar with it. Maybe you have it in your home or you have a local drop-off point. We're not going to talk more about that, though, because it's not plastic and it's not really what we handle at Sims, so that's another talk for another day. We also do not handle that bottom row, which, again, we get plenty of it. But these are what's currently not being recycled, right? This is our trash, what we call garbage, refuse. That's what's going to end up in landfill or incinerators. So let's go up to those top 2 rows for now. So Sims is a stopping point, just a stopping point for about 50% of New York City's recycled paper. So we then consolidate what we get and we send most of it to a paper mill that's right here in the 5 boroughs. It's right on Staten Island, and they are taking our recycled paper and making pizza boxes in a matter of days. So that's kind of cool for a local kind of closed loop situation. It's a little bit rare. They're also making Amazon boxes, so things that we use a lot in the city, let's be honest. Mostly though, we at Sims handle that blue row, metal, glass, cartons, and plastic. That is what we sort. There are our numbers. So we receive the materials looking like this. This is our tipping floor where all the DSNY trucks dump out their loads and where we get materials in from barges, from Queens and from the Bronx. You can see the paper is already off to the side. So we ask all of you, the fine people of New York City, to please put your paper in a separate bin or bag from the metal, glass, plastic, right? I see heads nodding, that's good, you know this. We want that paper to stay clean. It makes it a little more valuable, so that paper mill's gonna want it a little more. It doesn't get all schmutzed up with the residue, the food residue. That's an official word that I learned when I came on at Sims, schmutz. So paper is off to the side, but still we have that giant pile of mixed materials, right? Lots of it is plastic, yes. So using that really big sorting system that looks like this, we sort. Yeah, it's pretty big. You should come and see it. So I would love to nerd out with all of you right now and tell you all about this really intricate 95 to 97% accurate sorting system. Like tell you about these. So our optical sorters that use near infrared light and air jets to sort out all your different types of plastic. Oh, you can't see that air jet very well, but here's, yeah, that kind of shows basically what happens. So materials fly by on that conveyor. It's going about 9 feet per second. And then that near infrared light is going to identify the plastic it's looking for. And in a fraction of a second, cue an air jet at the end of the conveyor to shoot it off onto the correct conveyor belt. Yes, that's happening so many times a day. It's very exciting. Or I can tell you about our drum magnet, right? That's pulling out all ferrous metals, so all magnetic metals. Or this is really cool as well. Sorry, it's not plastic, but it's so cool. Our eddy current separator that uses a reversed magnet to repel non-ferrous metals. So they hit that reverse magnet and they fly onto their correct conveyor belt, and it's just flying materials all day long at Sims. So I could tell you so much more, but I don't have a lot of time. So you're gonna have to come on that tour, like I said before. So after we sort the materials, they come out looking like this. So they're tightly compressed cubes, each weighing about 1,000 pounds, some a little more, some a little less, made of one type of potentially valuable material. So we then sell that material to reprocessors or converters or manufacturers who will make it into new things. So all we do at Sims is we sort. We prepare these materials to go on and be recycled. We sort. That is our job. But we cannot do our job. Oh, there's pretty veil. We cannot do our job unless those top 2 rows are properly diverted from your waste stream, from that bottom row, right? Nothing is going to be recycled if it doesn't end up at Sims, and it's not going to end up at Sims if it's not put in the correct bin, and that is your job. So now we get to talk a little about how New Yorkers are doing at their job. So I could give you a whole list of items that are wish cycled. Okay, we can talk about items that are plastic or partially plastic that are wish cycled. Bowling balls. We get a lot of bowling balls. Shower curtains, Venetian blinds, single-use plastic bags. So we actually don't want things like that. Things like that do not belong in your recycling bin. Our curbside collection program only accepts, it says up there, hard plastic, or we also sometimes say rigid plastics. So the limerick is, if it's plastic and you can smash it, you should trash it. Kind of sad. But quick fun side note on that, our statewide, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation has a take back program for plastic film like this. So single-use plastic bags, bread bags, newspaper bags, that plastic wrapping that comes around like water bottles, which you should not buy a whole case of single-use plastic water bottles, but whatever. The plastic wrap that goes around that type of plastic film, we call it, you can take it all back to certain grocery stores and drugstores. Good, some people know about that. I love when people know. I love seeing the heads nodding. And they'll have a collection bin and it will be recycled. Even more exciting, our great state of New York is banning these. In a year, single-use plastic bags will be out. So cool, great. Yes, it's good. Wait, but now, okay, that was fun, but now we have to get back to how New Yorkers are doing it, putting the right thing in the right bin. We have to talk more about that. So, the capture rate for something like this. So capture rate means how much of it is actually ending up in the recycling bin, being captured, and not ending up in that bottom row, the waste stream. So the capture rate for something like this is at about 50%. That's not too bad, right? It's like not great, it's not terrible. It's 50%, so is the cup half empty or half full, right? But when you go to non-bottle rigid plastic, like yogurt cups, to-go containers, that capture rate goes down to about 30%. These items have actually been accepted in the curbside program for not as long as these, so maybe they're just taking longer to catch on, right, and get the word out. And those numbers are slowly increasing. We're getting more of these materials, and that's great. But the fact is we still have a lot of material that's potentially useful and is just going to landfill or incineration. So we're going to back up a little bit and kind of zoom out. I think Dave actually mentioned this number that I'm about to mention. So globally, it has been estimated that since plastic became a big thing around the 1950s, we have created about 8.3 billion metric tons of this stuff, right? Of that, about 6.3 billion metric tons has been disposed of. Of that, 9% has been recycled. Maybe you've heard these numbers before, maybe not, either way. So 9% we've recycled, 12% we've incinerated, and 60% has been disposed of in landfills or somewhere else in the environment. We all know how long it takes plastic to break down, right? No, we don't know how long it takes plastic to break down. No, we don't. People say like 500 years, and it's like, maybe, but no one's been alive that long. We just don't know. So I often ask myself, and I ask the people who come on tours, which may be you one day, how can we do better? I think that's a question for today, especially around plastics. How can we do better? How can we change the way that we deal with our waste? It's going to take a major shift in mindset, right? So for example, when we throw something away, how often do we think about where that thing goes? And I was so excited to hear your talk about systems and sustainability and thinking about where materials are coming from and where they are going, because that is so necessary as designers. This is a side note from my speech, but yeah, I'll get there actually. Think of where it's going and think of where it came from. But when we throw something away, how often do we think about where it is going? Because there's no away. It's not a place that's somewhere else. It's in someone's backyard somewhere, basically. It's here. It's on our planet. There's nowhere else to go. When I talk to second graders about landfills and we work together to describe them, I'm kind of getting them to understand what a landfill is, how it's just this place where we just throw our trash day in, day out, on and on, over and over. It doesn't take the second graders very long to look up at me and say, well, we can't keep doing that, duh. That's them on their own. But there's another side to this story as well. So thinking about where things go, but also when we buy something, which we are really good at doing, let's be real. How often do we think about where that thing came from and what environmental impacts came from the creation of that thing, right? We put a lot of thought into what we are buying, like is it fair trade, or is it organic, or is it no sugar, or low sugar, or 5-star reviews, or does it match my shoes, or whatever. But how often do we think about what actually went into the creation of that perfect whatever thing? Like I guarantee you, even if it's just a water bottle, it wasn't easy to make, and our earth is feeling the repercussions of that. So Now I've moved away from talking just about recycling, could you tell? Because before I'm done, I really want to talk to you about this. Yeah, so that's a landfill, and those are all the states that we send our trash to. It's about 9 different states where they go. So I really want to talk to you about this. All of these R's, right? I learned those first top 3 when I was very young, and maybe you all did as well. So recycling gets a lot of attention, doesn't it? Especially at my work, obviously. But it's actually not the answer. See, it's only 3rd from the top on this triangle stacked with most favorable option on top by the EPA. Recycling is good. It's helpful, it's well-intentioned, and I want all of you to be really, really good at it. But it's not the answer. It's a Band-Aid. When we recycle something, we're not eliminating the end of life for that material, we're just delaying it. And we're certainly not negating whatever environmental impacts came from the creation of that thing. So how can we not only learn to recycle, but also reduce the things that we use and reuse whatever we have? You know, can we stop before throwing something away in that fraction of a second and not just think about which bin should I put this thing in? It's not that complicated. There's usually only 3 of them. But can we also think about, wait, could I reuse this? Or could someone else reuse this? Or on the other side of the story, before we buy something, can we stop and think, do I really need this though? Really? So it's not all going to be on us. It's going to come down to design as well, right? What products are being sold to us? Are they durable? Are they sustainable? Are they reusable, refillable, recyclable? Do they include recycled content? Perhaps we'll see more sustainable design. Perhaps it'll come from this very school. Likely it will. That'll be great. You know, perhaps we'll see the end of single-use items. Our own city is pushing towards that. The mayor came out to Sims the other day and gave a press conference banning single-use foodware from city agencies. That's going into effect in the next year. And that's all great. Even if, as we head into that shift, though, we still, as individuals, have a responsibility. We have a need. We have a power to be responsible consumers who use less and who reuse whatever is reusable and who recycle what we can. You know, changing our relationship with plastic or any other type of material is going to take a big shift, but that big shift is going to start with each of us, each of you. And that's all I'm going to say. Thanks for listening. Come to Sims.
Hi, thank you, Kara. Our next speaker is Kim Markel. She is an artist and designer working in the Hudson Valley. She creates functional objects out of repurposed material. She's collaborated with Glossier, Eileen Fisher, and Gallery Lafayette on work incorporating waste material. The work is sold throughout galleries in the United States and Europe and has been exhibited worldwide. Her work was included at the 2018 London Design Festival exhibit, Plastic Scene, highlighting independent design studios elevating the perception of waste plastic. Her Glow collection was awarded the Radio Star Prize for Innovation, an ICFF award for Best Seating, and the Best of Year award by Interior Design magazine. Prior to beginning her studio in 2016, she developed public policy at the city, state, and federal level. She holds a bachelor's and master's degrees from the Carnegie Mellon University. Join me in welcoming Kim Markel.
So hi everyone, thank you for having me here today. A couple weeks ago, Dave asked if I would be interested in presenting my work with repurposed material to you, and of course I said yes. And then I spent the past couple weeks thinking about just what I wanted to talk about. So I thought that the most interesting and useful thing potentially would be to describe not just what I've been doing for the past couple years, but some of the challenges I've had with it, because you know, the more information you have about something, I think the better it is. So for the past 3 years, I've been working full-time as an artist and designer. Before that, I've made things as a hobby. So I worked in public policy for about a decade at the city, state, and federal level, developing public policy to help cities become more sustainable. So I worked on programs like car sharing for city employees or incentivizing alternative energy sources. And when I say I worked in public policy and now I'm working in design, sometimes people say, that's like really different. I actually don't think it is. I think both really are about solving problems, and more specifically about solving problems within a given set of constraints, right? Like those constraints can be given to us by anybody, by the law, by the government, by our budget, by our professor, or by our own guiding principles, our own values. So when I started to work as a designer full-time and started to put product into the world, I decided that my guiding principle and then my constraint with the work would be to produce it as responsibly as possible. So for me, that means a couple different things. Responsible production means being really careful about who I'm working with. You know, who are the makers, who are the fabricators that I'm working with? How do they treat their employees? Where does my material come from? Am I shipping it really far? Can I make it all locally? And then more specifically, can I work with materials that are either sustainable or that are repurposed? So I'd like to talk, any of those topics in themselves is a discussion and an event in itself. So today I want to focus on my work with repurposed materials and then specifically about working with recycled plastic. So just a quick overview of some of my projects in the past couple years. This is a project that I showed at Sight Unseen last spring. These are delicate white tables that are made from leftover stone powder from tile and countertop cutters. They're actually marble composite. And I used that powder to make sort of a sculptable material that I spun on a lathe, and then I used those lathed items to construct tables. And that's me in my studio. The second project that I'm going to show you is this injection molded polypropylene. So this looks very, very similar to what Dave does in his class, and indeed it is very similar. It's sort of akin to the precious plastics concept. These pieces were all created from used cosmetics packaging that I collected from stores throughout the city. The molds are made from aluminum, and then the injection molder is something that I found on eBay that needed some help, so I got it pretty inexpensively. The pieces on the right are a line of little vanity objects that were made for Galeries Lafayette. Galeries Lafayette is a department store in Paris. And they were interested in offering a recycled collection. So together we came up with this concept of creating vanity items from objects that were previously on the vanity but in a different setting as a cosmetic component. And then this slide is some of the furniture pieces that I make. So you can see the mold and then the casting and then the initial material. So these pieces are made from a composite of old or defective eyeglass lenses and then defective acrylic polymer and monomer. And now I'm actually incorporating some cosmetic jars that are also made of acrylic because I happen to have found a good source of them. So I started to show these pieces in 2016, and now they're sold throughout a few galleries and retailers, and in the city they're sold by ABC Carpet. So in each of these projects, my goal was to use the repurposed material as a resource in itself and sort of celebrate the qualities it had regardless of whatever stigma was associated with it. But let's talk more specifically about working with plastic as a repurposed material because that's what this event is about. So we have, as everyone's iterated and everyone knows, we have a super real plastic problem. It's got a terrible reputation. And to be clear, I don't advocate creating any more plastic. And I don't think that recycling in itself is a solution to the problem, as like you just did an amazing job explaining. It's not effective enough. We have to change our habits and our consumption and our production of it entirely. But we're also in this really strange place where we have such an abundance of plastic that already exists. So in some of my work, I'm choosing to use this existing plastic as a resource in itself and as a material to create with. And if you think about it, as a material, old plastic has a lot of qualities that make it really interesting to work with. It's easily shapeable, you can melt and remelt it. It comes in a variety of colors, translucencies. It's super durable, it's resilient, it lasts forever. If you take away the stigma, these are really interesting qualities for a designer to explore, I think. But choosing to work with this material is an act of conscious effort, and there are some pretty big challenges with it. It's stigmatized, it's experimental, and then because of those reasons, when you try to have it manufactured or scaled in any way, it also becomes pretty challenging. So the first challenge that I'd like to talk about is the experimental nature of it. When you're trying to figure out any process or material on your own, it's super experimental. There's no textbook to look up just how to get something to work. So it's all about experimenting and testing and iterating, really to no end. But I think if you accept these frustrations and these setbacks as just the learning experience that's necessary as a powerful way to gain information, it kind of moves it from being a disappointing part of the project to something that you realize that you have to go through in order to get to an endpoint. So literally everything that I've worked on, the projects that I just showed you, took months and months just to get them to look like halfway decent before, I'd ever even want to show anybody a picture of what I was working on. So for example, the molds, the photos on the left are of these molds that I made for combs that are actually out in the auditorium space or the event space, whatever it's called. So you can see, the first mold, the first try didn't really fill completely, the second one overfilled. So it's just like a matter of tweaking, and there's industry guidance that you can sort of look at to figure out, what is the shrinkage rate of polypropylene? But then, I don't really have the engineering or technical facilities in my very rudimentary studio to figure that out on my own. So it really comes down to trial and error. So that's the first challenge of working with recycled plastic as a material. The second challenge is probably one of the biggest ones, and that's that plastic is such a stigmatized material, and it's rightfully so, right? It does terrible things to our environment. But beyond that, there are stigmas associated with it as a material. I mean, it's cheap, it's seen as disposable, it's seen as flimsy, it's perceived as probably the lowest material that you can work with. So if you consciously choose to work with recycled plastic, how do you make something that someone actually wants, that they don't see as disposable or cheap, but rather something that they treasure, and then from a business perspective, something that they're actually willing to pay for? It's really not easy to change associations. So when I started working with plastic, I started, to think about my feelings towards it, and I knew the plastic that I didn't like. I knew that it felt sort of cheap and flimsy and that I would throw it away. But then I also realized that there was some plastic and some memories of plastic in my life that brought me a lot of joy. So as a kid in the 90s, I was surrounded by plastic. I had colorful plastic everywhere, from jelly shoes to these magical little Polly Pockets. I don't know if any of you had them. To inflatable pool toys. I found these to be really mesmerizing. The texture, the color, the way the light interacted with them, they all kind of seemed to possess a little bit of magic to me. And then they also kind of look weirdly candy-like or edible too. So there's probably a biological primal component to why we're attracted to this sort of stuff, or at least why I am. So when I started my work with reclaimed plastics, I was interested in evoking the same sort of feeling. So in my work, I consciously use these colors, translucencies, and textures that are reminiscent of things that I had in the 90s and that are edible. And I also stay away from anything that has too much of a manufactured or disposable feel. So anything that's too opaque or too high shine, that's a conscious decision to not have the pieces incorporated. because I think, it looks too manufactured and it doesn't look like something you'd want to eat, if that makes sense. So it's also why the pieces are made in like more of an organic shape and less geometric. So I put a ton of thought into how these pieces could be aesthetically accessible to people, and to sort of hopefully have the material transcend its associations. But, was this or is this enough to destigmatize the material and have people want it? In my experience, I think yes and no. To an extent, it's been successful. I mean, the pieces are photogenic. They have an interesting story. So when I first introduced the line, it got a bunch of press and some retailers picked it up. So that's been successful, but it's also had some less positive reactions. Inevitably, someone always says to me, why would I spend $20 or why would I buy this chair when I can spend $20 on a plastic chair from Home Depot? Or I can buy a comb from Amazon for $1.15. So, I don't know if wood, if the same counterpart in wood would create that same statement over and over again, but I certainly get a lot of it all the time. And then another pretty telling example that I'd like to share with you is that when I first showed this collection of furniture in 2016, I was approached by a high-end Tribeca design gallery who was potentially interested in it. And I talked with the owner for a while. He came to my studio. We did a studio visit. We emailed back and forth. We had a few meetings. But he was always super reticent. And then finally, he just said to me, he's like, can you just cast them out of any other material but this old plastic? So for him, like this, changing the aesthetic or working this way, it wasn't enough to change the stigma. He didn't think that these pieces, because of the material, could command the sort of pricing that he needed to get in order to have his gallery run. So, that it didn't work out. But overall, I think the perceptions of the stigma associated with it are changing, and I think people are more apt to want a product that is recycled or to want one that has a well thought out story. So though it's a challenge, I think it's gaining momentum towards a positive direction. So beyond the challenge of working with a material that has a stigma and that's experimental, if you happen to get a product that people want, there's a big challenge in producing with a repurposed material. So, it's very different making 5 or 10 pieces from making 500 to 1,000. Your problems become very different. Your scaling becomes very different. And this is, a problem that any smaller independent designer faces. But when you work with a repurposed material, it becomes a little bit trickier. So sourcing is one of the biggest parts of my work. Honestly, it's probably the biggest part. You can't just call up a shop and order the material you need. You really have to plan out how you're going to find it and how you're going to source it. It takes a lot of effort to make arrangements with factories who produce, with scrap dealers who are willing to sell in low volumes, and with retailers who will collect and store their old plastic. And it's mostly connecting with people who are willing to go just a little bit out of their way because they believe in the work or the project. But if you've seen Dave's setup or you've worked at all with him, you know that there are so many components and so many processes just to get to your raw material, right? You have to collect it, you have to sort it, clean it, shred it, more clean it. You can't contaminate it at all. That's a ton of work. So even though my material starts out free or very, very inexpensive, by the time all of those hours of processing and handling has gone into it, it actually adds up. And then the last issue that I want to talk about is when you want to scale and find someone else to manufacture the pieces for you. If you're working with a repurposed material or a process that's a little bit experimental, it's really tough. I mean, if I had, an order for 50 metal tables, I could call a metal fabricator or a welder and ask for some help. When I went and I tried to explain that I was making these chairs out of old eyeglass lenses and would you be interested in this project? I mean, I think half the people just laughed at me. So I made these chairs, about 100 a year, by myself for the first couple of years, until I found somebody who was willing to help, and I supply the material, the recipes, the molds, pretty much everything. And I went and I spent about, a few weeks with him getting the process just right. And so that's worked, and I've been able to scale in a very small way, my furniture project. The small injection molded pieces I haven't scaled yet. I don't know yet, though, if that's a problem that I'll have to solve. I have to see if I keep getting orders for it, and then I'll worry about it. But if it is something that I want to scale, I really hope to be able to connect with the precious plastics community. So that may be in the future. So this all sounds like a lot of work, and it is, right? It's experimental, it's frustrating, and for every one thing that goes right, 300 go wrong. But whenever I'm totally exhausted from working this way, I just seem to happen upon some really cool, really interesting project that someone somewhere is working on. Arta, you showed a few examples of materials. I was like, ooh, I want to try that. So these are a few projects that I've been really excited about lately. Dave mentioned the furniture from EcoBirdie that's made from recycled toys. The top right is a composite made from sunflower seeds that I think is just gorgeous. And then the bottom right is a bioplastic material made from shellfish. So, these are all, I think, really exciting projects and things that inspire me. And for me, to have found my way into a community through this work who really cares about how and why they're making things and what they're putting into the world is really exciting. So while I do think that the challenges are real and they exist, I also think that they're totally worth pursuing. So thank you for having me here today and letting me share my work with you. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to answer any questions later.